my dear friends, colleagues in legal profession, and my fellow citizens. Today, I would like to share my views on Indian parliamentary democratic system. The question is Indian parliamentary democracy on the decline and heading towards majoritarian autocracy? On this subject, I would like to share my thoughts. As you know well, on 28 May 2023, Honorable Prime Minister Modi inaugurated a new parliament building with much fanfare and all by himself, with a grand display and placing of Sengol, what is called Rajadandam, in the new parliament building, which is a symbol of monarchy and signifies the transfer of power from one king to another king, originally said to have been used by Chola rulers, giving rise to controversy, more particularly for excluding the head of the state and parliament, that is President of India, from the inauguration, which was criticized as a quite contradiction to the parliamentary democracy, where people are the rulers and elect their representatives to serve the nation and not to rule over them like kings of yesteryears. The inauguration of new parliament would have been a festive and harmonious event in its true sense had the President of India, the presiding officers of both houses of parliament, leader of opposition and leaders of all other political parties been involved and participated to present a united commitment of the people to the parliamentary democracy. The Article 79 of the Constitution of India states that there shall be a parliament for the union which shall consist of president and two houses of parliament for the union, which shall consist of for the union, which are respectively known as the Council of States, that is Rajya Sabha, and the House of People, Lok Sabha. It is the President of India who summons, prorogues and addresses the parliament. In other words, the parliament cannot function without the president. So the undignified act of excluding president from the inaugural function of new parliament building violates the spirit of the Constitution of India. Apart from this intentional constitutional impropriety, the brazen display of obedience to the Sengol, Rajadandam, and installing it in the new parliament building totally negates the very foundational principles of the Constitution, which envisages parliamentary democracy and governance in accordance with the Constitution framed by the people and presented to themselves. That means it is the will of the people which reigns supreme and not the autocratic sign of Sengol, Rajadandam. The arrogance shown in the inauguration of new parliament building by excluding the President of India, Vice President, knocked away the very foundation dignity of the occasion. And in this connection, the dignity and nobility of the inaugural ceremony, which was further compounded by the fact that the absence of as many as 21 major political parties. The presence of Sengol, Rajadandam in parliament would falsify the history of secular democratic republic and undermines the essence and rationale of parliamentary democracy. Of course, Modi and his government has been consistently and systematically undermining the supremacy of the parliament for the last 9 years, passing several controversial legislations without any debate and relentlessly hollowing out the parliament by not allowing any fruitful debate, by not consulting opposition members, and by suspending or disqualifying them on some pretext or the other, or creates a situation by its own members leading to adjournments of both houses of parliament. This kind of trend, where the executive which draws its power and responsibility from the parliament and accountable to parliament would dominate the parliament, was not envisaged by the constitution makers. the founding fathers of this great democratic republic nation, including the father of Indian Constitution, Baba Saheb Ambedkar, favored parliamentary democracy and hoped that it would be an ultimate panacea for the problems of the nation. Of course, with some apprehensions concerning the country's multilingual, multicultural and multi-religious character and ethos with huge socio-economic disparities. Baba Saheb Ambedkar, who had faith in the parliamentary democracy and the values enshrined in the constitution, was also apprehensive of the implementation of the provisions made in the statute by future governments. That is why, in his word of caution, while presenting the draft constitution in the Constituent Assembly Parliament on 26th November 1949, he said, "I feel however good a constitution may be, it is sure to turn out to be bad, because those who are called to implement it are happen to be a bad lot. Likewise, however bad the constitution may be, it may be turn out to be a good one if those who are called to work it happen to be a good lot. The constitution can provide only the organs of the state, such as legislature, the executive and the judiciary. The factors on which the working of these organs of the state depends on the people and political parties they will set up as their instruments to carry out their wishes and policies." Baba Saheb Ambedkar counted the advantages of having parliamentary democracy. In parliamentary democracy, there is legislature to express the voice of the people. There is executive, which is subordinate to the legislature. I would like to stress this point, that executive, which is subordinate to the legislature and bound to obey the legislatures. Over and above the legislature and the executive, there is independent judiciary to control both of them and keep them within the prescribed bounds. Parliamentary democracy has got all the marks of popular government, that is government of people, by the people and for the people. So Baba Saheb Ambedkar wanted that the country to be run on the core principles enshrined in the Constitution of India, on the basis of liberty, equality, fraternity, with checks and balances among parliament, executive and judiciary, to avoid any kind of excesses or dictatorship. For the successful functioning of the parliamentary democracy, Baba Saheb Ambedkar put forward certain conditions. Firstly, there must not be any glaring inequalities, socio and economic, in the society. There must not be an oppressed class or a high class that has got all the privileges and power. Secondly, there must be a strong opposition in existence. Democracy means discussion, debate, veto power of the people in periodic elections, where they vote out the government which failed to meet their aspirations and expectations but gave a bad governance. Strong opposition in parliament act as an immediate veto that curbs the autocratic tendencies of the government in power. Lastly, he stressed that democracy requires a functioning of moral order in the society, a vibrant public conscience, as there is no place for tyranny of majority over the minority in a parliamentary democracy. Finally, he declared that democracy is not merely a form of government. It is primarily a mode of associated living, of conjoint communicated experience. It is essentially an attitude of respect and reverence towards our fellow men. He firmly believed that the successful working of parliamentary democracy depends on two important aspects. Number one, strong opposition, and number two, free and fair elections. A functional and effective opposition is important for a free political life, without which democracy cannot sustain, and free and fair election ensure a peaceful transfer of power from one section of community to the other. Thus, the parliament is an essential institution of democracy, where acts of government are scrutinized to ensure that it will not deviate from the constitutional mandate, which was repeatedly stressed by the first Prime Minister of Free India, Sri.Y.Jaya Raju. During that period, there was hardly any effective opposition. Yet, its voice was not only heard, but given due respect, and it was believed that opposition was an integral part for the smooth functioning of the parliamentary system. But during the last 9 years, Indian political system has changed, and the role and functioning of the parliament is severely undermined and thoroughly declined with the increasing executive dominance constraining the power and functioning of the parliament. More particularly, the political ideology now turned to right, and the one-party dominant majoritarian system has brought fundamental change in the rules of engagement in parliament and outside as well. The problem was further compounded by the fragmented opposition which weakened the parliamentary democracy. Parliamentary democracy gains legitimacy and credibility through discussion and debate, but the present majoritarian one-party dominance and its utter regard for such process and the weak opposition resulted in the undermining of the importance of parliament. The ruling party's hegemonic attitude, dominant conduct, disruption of the proceeding to avoid critical scrutiny and debate of government actions, scant regard for parliamentary standing and select committees, partisan attitude of the presiding officers, giving go-by to the neutrality has resulted in deep decline of parliamentary supremacy in recent times. Even as per the official data, the number of sitting days of the Lok Sabha reduced from an annual average of 121 days during 1952-70 to only 56 days in the year 2022. The decline is all the more evident in passing legislation at lightning speed without any useful debate and discussion on the bills. For instance, in September 2020, two important set of laws, farm laws and also labor codes, were passed without discussion amid protest by the opposition and bypassing the required voting procedure specified by the parliament business rules. Space for the opposition voice has been sharply shrinking, and resorting to ordinance route, bypassing parliament, further eroded the significance of the parliament. Added to this, referring some important bills to the scrutiny of standing committee has seen a drastic reduce from 71% in 15th Lok Sabha 2009-2014 to 27% in 16th Lok Sabha 2014-2019, and now it further reduced to 13% only, 13% since 2009. And even the bill revoking Article 370 pertaining to the Jammu and Kashmir did not go through a parliamentary committee scrutiny, and it was done even without consulting the elected government there. In principle, and as envisaged by the Constitution, the executive is accountable to the parliament for all its actions and lawmaking, but that has been given a go-by. The opposition needs to be consulted on all important legislation and actions of the government, which have become rarest of the rare, or no such discussion or consultations at all. For instance, before announcing demonetization, which affected millions of Indians, and are imposing lockdown during COVID-19 pandemic period, abrogation of Article 370, or even in case of construction of new parliament building, or even now its inauguration, no such consultation was held with the opposition. On the other hand, with its brute majority and one-sided partisan attitude of the presiding officer, the government is having all its way all the time in parliament, reducing the parliament's role, only giving formal approval of its actions without any discussion or debate. Whether they are in conformity with the constitutional mandate or democratic ethos or not. This deterioration in the functioning of the parliament is a matter of serious concern and subject of intense debate, with the latest episode of inauguration of new parliament building ignoring and excluding all the people that matters. The decline in the parliamentary democracy also has been a subject of comment even outside the country. In its annual report on global political rights and liberties, US-based non-profit Freedom Home downgraded India from a free democracy to a partially free democracy. Likewise, a Sweden-based VDM Institute said India had become an electoral autocracy and later described it as a flawed democracy. Thus, the brute majority enjoyed by the ruling party is being used as a bulldozer, which is the term coined now, very used frequently in these days, a bulldozer to turn parliamentary democracy into an autocracy, the new Indian version of majoritarian presidential form of governance. This trend and intent was demonstrated in the inauguration of new parliament building and undue reverence shown to the Senghol, the scepter, the Rajadandam, and its installation in the parliament. This undesirable turn of events takes us back to the caution given by Baba Saheb Ambedkar, the father of Indian Constitution, on the success of Constitution and parliamentary democracy, saying that it depends on the people who are called to implement the constitutional mandate, that is whether they are good or bad, and also a vibrant public conscience watching the action of the government, the elected, and use their veto power during the time of elections. So it is ultimately for the people in the parliamentary democracy to be watchful of the functioning of the government of the day and the way in which direction the government is going, and take appropriate action at appropriate time to preserve and protect this parliamentary democracy and the Constitution of India by defeating the evil designs of autocratic and majoritarian politics. So this remains our solemn duty as citizens of India to arise and awake for our duty to protect this Constitution and the democracy in the country. So thank you very much. Jai Bhim, Jai Bharat.